stars, and that's who we are. We are voices. There's nothing to fear. Explode in your rear. Feel our voices.
Boom.
What's up,
Carl.
What?
Carl's looking beautiful today.
Yeah, we sent Carl to Florida.
We did, huh?
Yeah, so, meanwhile, this is Ed.
This is Mike.
And joining us tonight.
I'm Terry Gant, owner of Third Coast Comics at 6234 North Broadway in Chicago, Illinois.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
That is it right there.
Just drop it on.
Right.
Everything they need to know, boom, right there. You're done.
That's it.
Yeah.
Take note, future guests. Don't mess around. Awesome. How you doing today?
Doing good. Doing good.
Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited to have Terry on as both a comic shop owner and passionate fan.
Right.
And we'll definitely be throwing some passion around tonight. This is
not all of your listeners are going to like me very much by the end of this. Or you either, probably. I'm going to lose you some people. And maybe gain you some other people. Let's see what happens.
yeah. I don't know.
If they jump off, fuck them. Keep it moving.
That's
Love
easy for
it.
you to say. Fuck 'em.
Fuck it, you jump off, pussy.
Cool. And as always, great to see you, Mike.
Good to see you too, Bobo.
Yeah, you're looking well.
Thank you. Here we have that was a bad week. Failed suicide attempt here in this region.
You tried to shoot yourself in the sinus.
No. Wait a minute.
Difficult. Don't want to live anymore. You got that cute as close as it could possibly get.
Boom. Done. Gone. I'm over. A dream that once was.
Yeah, it's tough being alive.
Yeah, it is. So what do we got? What do we got for the day, for the conversation? What's up? What's happening?
Yeah, we are going to get into, like we said, kind of maybe some tough topics. It's going to be, hard talking times on the old VOR. And I was inspired by Terry's shop just had its 6th anniversary.
Yep.
So especially
Nice.
for a comic shop in this day and age, right?
Right.
Holy shit. Still going strong.
Opened 6 years ago, celebrated our 6th anniversary yesterday.
Yeah. It was great.
Cool. Well, this is kind of off topic, but I want to ask, because you live in Chicago, of all places, that it's referred to as the second city, but it's not. It's huge and outrageous. And being here in Orlando, where we have sort of a glut of comic book shops, and every now and again, guys like myself, I'm sure, Ed, at some level, at some point, you at some point 7 years ago were thinking, oh, maybe I should open a comic book store. What's it like owning a comic book store in Chicago? Like, how does that work? Because I would assume there's probably one every about mile away from you.
There is exactly one a mile away. I used to have one a mile in 2 different directions, but one of those is no longer with us. So my shop is sort of near the northern edge of Chicago, so it means going south more into the city. I get 1 mile there. I got one about 4 miles going north now.
Right.
And then there's a few kind of like 3 miles away, maybe 4 or 5 miles away in other neighborhoods. The difference is that when I started doing this, I didn't realize that I'd be competing with other comic shops directly, because I started my shop as an online-only store 2 years before I opened my doors as brick and mortar.
Right.
My shop started as a school project, something that I was just kind of like looking at the business of comics and kind of the needs that I had and friends of mine had from a comic shop that weren't getting met, and trying to decide if I could actually fill those just as a school project. And then I showed it to a few folks, and they liked it so much, they were like, well, if you ever want to do it, I'd be a customer. So I said, what the hell? So essentially what I did is I created a website where I was only selling graphic novels, new and sort of like, so if something new came out that was interesting, I'd sell that, like a trade or a graphic novel of that on my website. But also if something had been out for a while but was also dope and people should get into it, let's say Sandman or Transmet, something like that from Vertigo, I could sell that too, because there's a lot of people, women especially, who were kind of feeling that I don't want to go into comic shops kind of thing, right? So
Right.
if you felt like you were being underserved by the way comic shops typically represented themselves, my business model was, hey, hit my website. That's all well and good. You can just buy the thing there no matter where you happen to be. But I wasn't trying to necessarily be Amazon. The trick to what I was doing was, if you lived within 2 miles of my office where I was working at the time, or my house, I would deliver the comics to you. Right? That enabled you to make a special order of graphic novels or set up a pull list for regular monthly comics. And then, hey man, if I can easily walk a couple of miles if my car broke down. So basically, what I had going for about 2 years was something that looked a lot like a nerd drug deal, where I would call you and say, hey man, I've got your stuff ready, you know, and even back then, I would say 50% of the people who we were dealing with were ladies, and some lady would come down, she would reach into my car, I would hand her a bag, she would hand me an envelope, and we'd drop off. It'd be done, right? And then after a while of doing that, it was kind of a lot of miles on the car, so then I switched it up a little bit, right? I decided the other thing that I do very well is social, so I decided what I would do is I would add my business model to my social calendar too, and then it was, while I'm working on papers, I'd work on papers at a public bar. I go to a bar to work on papers or work on orders for the online store, and then say to customers, hey, I know you need books, check it out. Why don't you meet me for a beer at Bar X, right? And I'll give you your comics. And what would end up happening is I show up to Bar X, set up my laptop, I get a beer, customer comes in, I hand them a bag, they hand me an envelope, they sit down for a beer, open up their bag, and the next thing you know, the bartenders want comics, right? So then I'm the comic selling dude to, like, you know, now I've got bartenders reading graphic novels, and I've got people coming to their bar saying, hey man, what are you reading? Oh, I'm reading Walking Dead, or I'm reading Starman, or I'm reading this old, like, Green Arrow series by Mike Grell. Dude, where do you get that from? Oh, a dude comes in here and just brings them, like the tamale guy, right? And I just show up and do that, and then I do that for 2 or 3 years, and then it got to the point where, for me, I couldn't grow that sort of business model without more manpower or more cash or more time, right? Something had to give. I was in school, I was working full-time. Sometimes my job involved travel. You know, my wife, this was not her thing. It wasn't her dream at all. It wasn't really even my dream. I had a whole bunch of other things I was going to do. You know, I grew up thinking I was going to be the next John Byrne. I didn't think I was going to ever be running a comic shop. You know, there are a lot of brothers on the south side of Chicago thinking, you know what I want to do someday? I want to die broke, and here's how. Right? Make mine Marvel. You know, that wasn't like a thing people were thinking back then. So I didn't know it was going to happen, and I just decided, you know, what the hell? Why not go for it? I looked at some of the comic shops in the area of Chicago, and there were a lot of them, and not, you know, the brick and mortar business being a lot different than the online business. My key was, I would take my wife with me, because ladies were one of the big markets that was definitely, I felt, underserved by traditional comic shops. I took my wife with me, and if my wife was ready to go within 10 minutes, that shop did something wrong. But if we were in that shop 15, 20 minutes and my wife said nothing to me, they did something right. So I took note of everything cool about any shop that she didn't say anything about, and that's what I tried to build my shop as. You know, whatever that is, it didn't matter if it was rack shelving, it didn't matter if it was paint on the walls, it didn't matter if it was carpet or hardwood, it didn't matter if they had plants, it didn't matter if there was a public washroom or not. If she didn't have a complaint, it meant she was comfortable, right? It meant there wasn't anything that called out to her to make her want to be someplace else. If she was fine spending 20 minutes there, an actual comic book fan could spend an hour. Right? That was kind of my thinking about it. So let me just go ahead and take note of those places, and then when I built my shop out, that's kind of what I was going for. Nice. So it didn't matter if there was a lot of shops in the area. The question was how many shops in the area were doing what I thought was the right thing by its customer base. You know?
Wonderful. See, that's the thing is what's interesting. I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to sort of sum all of that up.
It is your show. I'll stop all day.
The point. Well, I would.
You better stop me.
No, but what's great about it is that, one, it sounds to me like I could imagine just in graphic design school, working on a mock logo for an existing business that almost becomes the actual logo. Right. Like someone would go, oh my gosh, this could actually be it.
Right. And then they build a business around that thing. Would be kind of cool, right?
Right. And that's what happened with you. Here you are, you're working a project that somehow finds its way into our 3D world. But not only that, what I really, really like about what it is that you're saying is even in the comic book creator world, there is a level of research and footwork that is required. You do have to sort of go out, regardless of your niche, your personal niche, and what it is that you want to do. You do have to sort of force yourself out and outside of your comfort zone and look around and go, okay, what is not out here now?
Right.
What needs are not being met? What possible customers are not being serviced? And you did that, and then you brought your target audience with you, because your wife, she walks in and just like deadpan, 10 minutes, yo, we are gonna bounce.
Because you're doing the comic shop, it can take you 10 minutes just to find Batman, right? Like 10 minutes is really not enough time for you to understand what a shop's all about. Right. Like if you're really gonna get into it. So I figured 10 minutes was my window. If we only had about 10 minutes, and then she's like, okay, we're getting breakfast, or we're gonna grab lunch, or we're gonna be late for that movie. It's like, okay, well then, all right.
I love it that you're going on the vibe thing, because I'm a big vibe guy, and there's a lot of bookshops that you can go into, and they might hit on, they've got their Dewey Decimal down pat, they have no problem, everything's out in the open, the place is clean, but for some reason there's just something missing, and you're just not feeling it. It's hard to put your finger on, and you basically brought your litmus test with you. I think that's great.
I was my degree's in marketing, and one of the things that I had to do, it's hard to find research on comic shops, right? Like, so you can't, there's not a lot of places you can go where they'll be like, here's everything you need to know about how comic shops work. So I went to the area where I kind of thought I wanted to put my shop, and then I sat with my sketchbook for a couple of hours just outside just watching people. And if I saw the folks walking by that I thought were going to be like kind of my customer base, what I had in my head, and what my other researcher told me, this was the right place, and I just needed the price point to be right, and for the people to be there, and anything else can come. You know what I mean? Like comic book nerds can find a comic shop, but you can't do a comic shop in what was the 2008 economy, as it turns out. You couldn't have done a comic shop just expecting all the comic book nerds to just walk in the door, right? Mm-hmm. You have to make your money on people who are interested but not committed, right? You got to get those guys committed, and then you're good. Yeah, and that's what kind of worked out for us.
And a lot of people, as I've lived here and gotten to know more people who don't just make comics but also read comics, is the idea of a home shop. Yeah. I've never really had that. I've moved around a lot, but like I get comics when I get comics. Yeah. But the notion of having a home shop, so bringing people into a news store, that's going to be tough. So, I mean, if they're going to that place that's like a block or so away from you, and that's the only place they go to, and having those customers now come to your store, that's got to be a key.
Or finding there's a lot of in Chicago. They call it the second city, but there's a lot of damn people here, and you can cram a shit ton of people into 1 square mile. You know what I mean? Like our neighborhoods are sort of set up like little cities in a way, like their own little towns, and there are people who can stay in one. Like you live in Lincoln Square, you can spend days in Lincoln Square without leaving Lincoln Square for anything, just about. Right? So if you're a diehard Lincoln Square guy and Lincoln Square has a comic shop, there's no reason for you to go to Lakeview for a comic shop. Right. There's no reason for you to go to Ravenswood for a comic shop. That's just 1 and 2 neighborhoods over. Right? Yeah. You just wouldn't need to do it. It's not even like, oh, I like that shop more. It's really like, that's the shop that's here. And that's, if you can find a hole where you can sit something, which is what I just kind of sat down in the middle of the zone, like a wide receiver, seeing zone coverage and just being like, there's a guy over the top deep, there's a guy short, I'm just going to sit right here in the middle, I'll take a 30-yard pass every time. And that's kind of what I looked at it, right? Just, all right, there's nothing right there, and there's a whole lot of what I want, and those people aren't being served, I think, by the shops in the area. Why the hell not?
Right. Perfect.
But it's also, you bring a lot more to it than just having a comic shop, and not to be like the Third Coast show, but but I think it matters, and to like a lot of our listeners, we're not gonna say snobs. I'm gonna say we have discerning tastes and we have high standards, and it's
fun elitists
too. We're
fun elitists.
Fun elitists.
Or just bad people.
Or bad people.
Bad, mean people.
Terrible dicks. We have a reputation to uphold. Right. But it's that, as soon as I walked into your store years ago, it's one I'd always heard about, but it's like, yeah, I'll get around to it. And I was in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But, I'd been to other stores. Chicago Comics was always the place I loved going to the most.
Sure.
Even though it was always far away from me. But, I never worried about proximity.
Right.
In Orlando, you have to drive everywhere anyway, so when I lived there, it's just whatever.
Right, what difference does it make? It's a 4-mile drive. That's what you got to do. Yeah.
And as a guy who tries to make more comics versus reading everything, I just kind of don't care. So I go for the feel. And walking into your shop, it's very comfortable. The vibe is very positive. You know,
Thank you.
You create, like, you bring the personality of the store, but even just when you're not there, I mean, there's sofas, so it's like you're obviously inviting people to just read a bit.
Yeah.
Don't make a day of it, of course.
Right.
Come on, people. But
there is a point at which I will
with it.
say to somebody politely,
Yeah.
all right, bro,
Yeah.
you know,
Right, but
it's time.
so it's welcoming.
Yeah.
It's not just a big superhero machine.
Sure.
You have a lot of indie stuff. It's very indie friendly. There's a pretty good manga section. There's and very open to local artists, which is fantastic. That you support local artists.
And one of the local artist thing is something that is also kind of difficult to curate because when you're running a business, you don't actually have a lot of time to get out there and meet people, right? Like you don't have a lot of time to go to events where like there might be local artists. So when you get an opportunity to do that, you have to make the most of it, right? You have to get to know folks. When someone says to me, "Hey, I've got a comic," I don't say, "Well, what's your comic about per se?" You know what I mean? I don't need to screen my local artists. What I have to do is get them to bring something in. Just bring it in. You know, if you once it's in the store, I can help you. You know, a lot of times I used to spend a lot of time with like local artists who were in the process of making a book, and I've had to stop that because it's like, man, until it's done, there's nothing we can really do, and it's got to you've at least got to get it to where it's finished. If you get it to where it's finished, Third Coast can support it. You know, and a lot of times with local artists, I find that they are again sort of like trapped in that bubble of going to the one or two shops that they know of, and because artists aren't really good at selling themselves. You're not trained to. You're trained to create art. You are not trained to sell you. You know, it's one of the most difficult things to do. I've got some fantastic storytellers out there who've got really interesting stories and ideas and lives, and getting them to spread that across this city is like pulling teeth. You know?
Guilty. It's
hard to do.
It's really
difficult.
hard. Mike knows. I know. It's
like that's
really
the job. You're not. We think about it like we make comics, but you don't actually make comics. You sell you, right? The comic is to sell you, right? Like I don't know how much money you make on Chrome and Dust, right? I have no idea how much money you make on it, but theoretically that could be a vehicle to something else, which is what on a larger scale lots of comic book writers and artists in certain companies do anyway. But even as an indie artist, your comic is a vehicle to get you other jobs in comics potentially. Or to take that thing someplace else too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It isn't just about like $3.99 on a cover and cashing in. That is something a lot of artists get stuck on, and it makes it difficult, to build a brand. You have a brand.
Right.
You're trying to build a brand.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to help local artists build a brand.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, obviously he knows what the hell he's talking about. So, well, cool. Well, without further ado, we're gonna wrap this up and come back tomorrow and really get into the nitty-gritty.
Tomorrow, I will still be wearing the Spider-Man shirt because I like it so much.
Yes.
I will still be unbathed.
Hey, that's the beauty of the internet. We don't have to smell people.
Yes.
Wait till Google's Smell Edition shows up.
There we are.
Awesome. So do that. Come back tomorrow. Meanwhile, go to vorradio.com and you can give us feedback on the Republicom. Leave us a voicemail. Or we have links to Facebook group, always active, 24 hours a day. We do post there. It's a lot of fun. And also drop us a line and email if you hate the sound of your own voice, because we will play your voicemail in the fourth segment.
That we do.
Absolutely. Guaranteed. Guaranteed your money back. Cool. So that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. And hey kids, may the force
Be with.
That ass!
Hell yeah!